filter through. And when the Huns come out of Asia in the middle of the 4th century, 5th century AD, then we have thousands of barbarians coming across the border. Now this sounds a little bit like what's going on in the southwest of the United States. This is just another one of the comparisons, the analogies you can say between the Roman state and the American state. Those weren't the only reasons. Okay, a couple other things you might want to add to your list of reasons why Rome fell. Decline of the cities. Okay, Roman cities began to decline. Rome being the best example. Okay, the city of Rome was at the height of the empire, we'll say about 200 AD, was a city of 1 million people. By 50 years, 60 years, 70 years after the collapse of the Roman Empire in 476, Rome had a population, we believe, of 12,000. So it went from a city far bigger than Columbus, Ohio, to a city approximately the size of London, Ohio. Okay, from about 1 million, the population of the Roman Empire in about the year 200 AD was approximately 1 million, and the population of the Roman Empire by, we'll say 50 to 100 years after the fall, around 35, 40, we estimate as being about 12,000. These people have been living in the ruins of this vast, empty, depopulated, burned out, collapsed city. Must have been an awful life. Okay, none of the aqueducts had ceased to work. Everything was in ruins. And this decline of the cities had started long before the fall of Rome. That's one of the concerns that Americans have had in the last 50, 60, 70 years, is our cities have been having problems. And that, raises questions. Another thing you might want to write down is the fact that trade declined precipitously. Okay? And with trade declining, so goes the economy, because the moment that Mr. Elmore doesn't believe that he can ship goods anymore from one point to the next safely, that there's a market for those goods once he gets there, what's going to happen to all the people working in his business? What's going to happen to them? They're going to get fired. They're going to lose their jobs. Okay? And so you have this general fraying, withering away, frittering away of the economic power of the empire. You also might want to write down is that the big farms began to be increasingly self-sufficient. That you didn't need to buy goods from any place anymore because you either did without or made them there right on the farm. And this is the beginning of the big landed estates of the Middle Ages. Another reason that Rome often is described, or one of the reasons it's described as causing the fall of Rome, is lead. Okay, we've done the mainstream ones. This is a little quirkier one, but there's a lot of evidence that says it suggests it may be right. The Romans used lead everywhere. It was their all-purpose metal. They loved using it in their plumbing systems. It was easy to work with, and it was heavy, and it lasted indefinitely. And they loved using it in cooking utensils. They would make big bowls out of brass or tin and then line it with lead to make it watertight and smooth on the inside. And if you know anything about Roman cuisine, which is the forerunner of Italian cuisine, they used lots of sauces. The Romans put sauces on everything. And they were always based on grapes. And you would take grapes and you would mash them up, or you would just simply take wine, pour it into a big container, put it on the fire and heat it all day, and as the moisture evaporated out of it, you would get this kind of jelly-like stuff, okay, which then you would add seasonings and other things to make it into a sauce to put over stuff. Now, if you are drinking water that comes out of lead pipes, you're bathing in pools that are filled by lead pipes, and you are eating food drenched in sauce made in bowls lined with lead, what's the problem? You have lead poisoning. And there is a theory in history that the Romans, particularly towards the end of the empire, were their lead content in their body was like 40 times what the recommended maximum is in today's society. And if you say, oh, this is just another one of those crackpot theories Mr. Jackson discovers, there's a lot of evidence to prove it may be right. One thing is, what is one of the hallmarks of lead poisoning? Anybody know? I'm not looking at Mr. Isaacs for any particular reason.
Why?
Okay? Quirky behavior. Okay? Strange, unusual, bizarre behavior.
We called you weird.
And I did not. And that's the last thing I'd say about Mr. Isaac. But if you look, in all seriousness, if you look at the writings about ancient Rome written by the ancient Romans, the further up the social scale you went, and I hope you're all listening to me, the further up you went the social scale, the more likely you were to manifest what we would call mental problems. And of course, the further up the social scale you went, the better you ate, and the more likely you were to ingest large amounts of lead. The other problem with lead poisoning, nobody has mentioned, is sterility. Okay? You can't reproduce. Now, Robert is the most interested looking. I've seen him in days back there. Okay? Robert? Robert, it wasn't that the Romans didn't try. Okay? They tried a lot. If you read anything about Roman reproductive lifestyles, the Romans make Playboy pale by comparison. Okay? They lived very active lives in that department. But, okay, the thing you want to write down is, from about 200 onwards, the Romans began seriously not reproducing. And as the Roman reproductive levels declined, inside the boundaries of the empire, non-Romans increasingly made up a majority of the population. Because Romans weren't reproducing, the people down on the bottom who probably weren't accessing the wonderful water systems and weren't eating on the scale that the Romans did, okay, they didn't have some of these problems, and they had lots of children. So the thing you want to write down is, with each passing century, the percentage of pure Romans in the Roman Empire declined. That's what we think, based on what access that we have to, the census information from the time period. Now, to give you an SD, which you might want to have down, at the Battle of Chalons in 451, the last great battle to keep the Huns out of the Roman Empire, which the Romans won, remember, but it's sort of the last great sledgehammer blow that the empire withstood, and from then on it went downhill very rapidly. But that last great battle, it is said that in that battle, on the Roman side, the majority of the Roman soldiers weren't Romans at all. They were German barbarian soldiers that either were serving for pay or had been given as citizenship status inside the Roman Empire, but they were not genetic Romans. Okay? They were non-Roman, either citizens or mercenaries of the Roman state. So this was a problem as well. But when you take all of these things together, by 476, and this is my key thing, you want to make sure you have down your notes. By 476, the Roman Empire, yes, officially is killed off by barbarian invasions overrunning the Rhine-Danube frontier. But really, the state had already died of illnesses, okay, inside the state before the actual end came. The state was terminally ill with a variety of economic and social and other kinds of problems. Yeah.
So whenever Constantine built Constantinople, he didn't use lead pipes or anything like that?
Oh, well, to some degree, yes, he did. But the lifestyle of the Eastern Romans was a little different than the lifestyle of the Western Romans as far as their diet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about today. The Eastern Roman Empire says the word Roman in it, but it really wasn't a Roman state. Yes?
So they were completely unaware that they were poisoning themselves?
They were completely unaware they were poisoning themselves. In fact, Aaron, we were completely unaware of the dangers of lead until the last 50 years. If you buy, some of you, since none of you have yet bought a house, if you sell a house, in most states in the Union, one of the first things you have to sign is that there's no lead paint in this house. And that's almost impossible to sign if the house is more than 50 years old, because even when I was your age, if you had your house painted, you had it painted with lead paint.
After 7 days,
Okay.
test for it.
Right. Exactly right. You know that exactly. It's only been since the 70s that the lead has been banned from being used. So we've only become aware of the dangers of lead on any really wide-scale basis the last 50 years. Okay. Yeah.
You said something about how like the Romans were becoming more not really Romans. I heard is either Trajan, I think it was Trajan that was actually born in Hispania.
A lot of the latter Roman emperors, and of course Trajan is right square in the middle, so he's hardly one of the last 10. But a lot of the latter Roman emperors were born outside of Italy, okay, increasingly outside of Italy. Now, some people might argue that was good because they were pulling the provinces into, but I think you also could probably prove, and I can't prove this with any statistics because I don't know, but I would say that, Austin, your point is well taken, that if you looked at the genetic background, the ethnic background of a lot of the later Roman emperors, they had non-Roman ancestries. Okay? All right? Anything else? Then let's do one more thing and we'll pause, okay? If you understand this, you understand that after 476, if anybody was going to continue the traditions of the Pax Romana, trade, efficient government, a sophisticated state, etc., it was going to have to be in the East. And this eastern state over here, okay, almost immediately becomes known as the Eastern Roman Empire, and it is really like stage 2 of the Roman state. I had a student 2 years ago say to me one day when we were getting ready for the test, he said, Mr. Jackson, he said, am I understanding this correctly? He said, you had the Greeks, the Hellenic Greeks, and then you had Hellenistic civilization. And now we got the Romans, and we have then the Eastern Roman civilization. And I said, well, you know what? I never thought of it that way, but you're probably right. Okay? That the Eastern Romans are to the Roman civilization very much like Hellenistic civilization was to Greek civilization, Hellenic civilization. Because the thing you want to write down is, the longer this becomes the new Rome, the more it is influenced by other civilizations. If you want an SD, I'll give you one. By the time we get to 1000 AD, because remember the Eastern Roman Empire lasts till 1453, so let's say by the time we get halfway through its run, if you walk down any street in any city in the Eastern Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, what language do you hear? Not Latin. Greek. Okay? This, you will occasionally even see a map that refers to this as the Greek Empire. Okay? It was a very Greek society. To the very end, they had Latin names for the emperors. The last emperor was Alexis Comnenus, okay, which is a beautiful Latin name. But I will bet you my last dollar that if Alexis Comnenus walked through that door and started to speak to us, he'd be speaking Greek.
I'll bet you.
Okay. Pardon me?
I'll bet you.
Okay, well, you arrange for Alexis Comnenus to come in, okay? I'll pay up my buck, all right? So, you know, this is it gradually ceases to be Rome and becomes something else. Now, that guy that shows up all the time, Voltaire, okay. Oh, sir, I disagree with what you say, but will defend to the death of your right to say it. That old, the Holy Roman Empire wasn't holy, wasn't Roman, and wasn't an empire. The same Voltaire, the man who wrote intelligently on a wide variety of things, he coined a new name for this state. When he was writing in the 18th century, he said that this state was the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Eastern Romans never used that term. No Eastern Roman document ever used that term. It's a modern term, if you want to call 18th century modern, okay? But today, 50% of the time when people refer to the Eastern, I bet it's more than 50%, probably 75% of the time, when people refer to the Eastern Roman Empire, they refer to it as the Byzantine Empire, coming from the word Byzantium, which was the original name of the city of Constantinople before Emperor Constantine took the little village and made it into the new capital of the Roman Empire. Okay? The Byzantine Empire. Now, is everybody comfortable with where we are at? Anybody have any questions? I know this is Friday, it's early dismissal, and you're all honed in for that. Robert's going to go home and study a little more about certain aspects of the Roman Empire. Are we okay? Well, why don't we stand up? Whoops, sorry. Voltaire, the great French philosopher, the man who said, sir, I disagree with what you say, what was defended that, the man who was great champion of religious and intellectual freedom. He also was a very good historian. He wrote about a variety of things. He's the man who says the Holy Roman Empire wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, it wasn't an empire. Probably very true also. He started calling this state the Byzantine Empire, and today most people use this term. Stand up, stretch, say hello. Come back. Ooh, oh my word. Well, yes, you're right. Might be a prize candidate. He was totally Hitler now. Even Hitler would I went out last far and you actually and you could prove when I leave here don't tell me when I come back to the bathroom. There's two discs that have the don't count the expansions. Because it adds a whole bunch of new content. Just too lazy to call and be like, hey, send me the class. Anyone else just want to go up and do that too? Right. You just play more with the pulls out his things. You need to water. Actually, Halloween on Sunday. Should have worried about it.
It doesn't affect you.
Like third period, I have ag. Fourth, and then sixth period, I have ag.
I'm sure just doing this to is gonna
I stay up there.
He's got his heart attack. He'd be like, what's up, man?
Lunch. I ate lunch last year.
Oh, I thought you were gonna start. I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
Obviously not now.
He passes out with the page falls over about 8 to 2. I don't hate you, bro. I was like, you don't? He's like, yeah, dude. So he's like, let's talk, man. I was like, oh. Robert, I really felt like he would always, I don't know, he would always act like a douchebag. Like, oh no, I'm just kidding. But he would never be like, oh, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's what I do. Oh, you like this? Oh, it's sitting on the seat. Okay, land please. That's gonna be online.
Corey, I drank all of that side.
Land, let's go.
It's a bowling sleeve.
What I'd like to do now is I'd like to kill off what we've just created. So you need to write down in your notes after a little line the decline of the Eastern Roman Empire. And then we're going to talk about Eastern Roman civilization. And by that, we're pretty well finished, and we'll switch gears and go to Islam.
Why aren't we starting out with the civilization first?
Pardon me?
Why don't we start out with the civilization first?
Because this time I thought it made more sense to do the history first and civilization second. If you disagree with me, I'm sorry. Okay? The Eastern Roman Empire peaks pretty quickly, within 50 years, 60 years of the fall of the Western civilization. In the East, there will be, 76 more emperors. I know it comes out to the same number as I gave you before. And again, though, I have to say to you, no two history books will agree on this, because on the Eastern Empire, just like in the Western Empire, there were multiple occasions where there was more than one emperor. So how do you count them if you have two people claiming to be the emperor? Okay, historians don't agree. But I would write down in my notes there were approximately 70 more emperors who ruled over a span of 900 plus years. Okay, 4 times as long as this country has been in existence since the Constitutional Convention. So we're talking about Even though we're spending only 3 days on it, a very long, bless you, a very long political history. There were many good emperors and also some duds. We're only going to look at one, forgive me God. One emperor, and that is Justinian. Okay? It's Justin with an I-A-N, Justinian. And Justinian's dates were 527 to 556. 520, I just misspoke. 527 to 565, sorry. 527 to 565. So he lived approximately 50, 60, 70 years after Rome has collapsed in the West. Okay? He was an excellent administrator who attempted to take back much of the old empire, and at the time of his death, he ruled everything that you see up here in gold, including most of Italy. Now, by the time he conquered it back, it was a husk, a shadow of its former self, but he did attempt to try to get all this territory back. It would be very short-lived, because right out to the side someplace, you want to write in 632, this nuclear bomb goes off called Islam. That's when the Islamic faith begins at 632. And it's going to change the face of the whole Mediterranean because it's going to be such a powerful force. But while he was alive, he did conquer back much of the old Roman Empire. And he attempted to return that area to some degree of civilization. For example, he gave up on the city of Rome. It was a hopeless disaster area. But he built a new capital city in the west, a city called Ravenna. Okay? There's a Ravenna, Ohio, named after it, R-A-V-E-N-N-A. Ravenna is over here on the east coast. It made sense from their point of view. This was the coast they had the access to. It's over here on the east coast. The city is in a remarkable degree of preservation. If you ever go to Italy, it's a lovely place to visit. Some beautiful churches, etc. And even some of the public buildings that are there are still left from the days of the Eastern Romans. Yes?
Who built this thing?
Justinian. This was all going on. And of course, when you're building a city like that, it just doesn't happen overnight, but he's the one who started all of this. There are probably 3 claims to fame that we should have down. One I've already touched on. He was a great military leader and gave the Eastern Romans quite a reputation, military reputation. Number 2, second thing you want to write down is he undertook vast public projects, construction projects. He made Constantinople the greatest city of the Middle Ages, a city that rivaled Rome. Some of the things that he built in Constantinople. This part of the world has water problems, okay? Has real water problems. It's a very dry climate, even drier over than Italy. For example, you have, of course, deserts down here, the Sahara. In this part out here, Turkey gets the rain probably of Arizona. So it's a place where water is in short supply. And one of the things, and they still exist, they don't use them anymore, but underneath the city of Constantinople today, if you dig down, or Istanbul today, if you dig down far enough, you'll go into great underground caverns carved out many times by people. They're not natural caverns, with big stone pillars to hold the ceilings up, and they flooded these things with water. Bless you. They dumped rainwater in there so that if the city was ever besieged or during droughts, they would have a water supply for the hundreds of thousands of people that lived in Constantinople. A second thing you might want to write down that was built during his reign was Santa Sophia that we mentioned before, okay? And this huge church, the greatest church in the world when it was built, okay? And here is the inside, and I'll pass this around so that you can look at it. But I want you to look down here and see if I can find somebody. There is a man, and there's the inside of the church, okay? The largest stone structure, domed structure that had ever been built. It was the largest dome structure built until the Astrodome in the 1960s here in the United States. And it wasn't built out of steel and concrete. It is stone on stone, splendid engineering. So I'll take you around. Now the inside, by the way, doesn't look anything like it did during Byzantine times, because it's eventually going to become a mosque, an Islamic mosque, and all the Christian decorations were stripped out of the building or painted over. Okay, but at least you get some idea of scale there. The third thing that he built in Istanbul was a great racetrack. Okay, the Byzantines, like the Romans, loved their racing, chariot racing, which was then the Indianapolis 500 NASCAR event of their day. The Romans had a great stadium in Rome. It's right next to the Forum. And I shouldn't say stadium. Well, it is a stadium, but it's a stadium for racing. It's not the Colosseum. The Colosseum's at one end of the Forum, and then there's the Forum, and on one side is the racetrack. And the Romans called theirs the Circus Maximus. Okay, circus meaning a circle, an oval. Maximus, big. Okay, the Circus Maximus. It's still there, although it's in pretty bad shape. But you can walk around it. Have any of you ever seen the oldie but moldy but splendid film called Spartacus? Okay, Spartacus.
Great film.
Well, the film that has the race scene, okay, the chariot race, that's supposedly taking place in the Circus Maximus.
Not really.
Okay, no, it's Hollywood makeup, and that movie, by the way, was made in the days before, obviously, digital faking, long before the Titanic, the first movie where they could fake scenes digitally. You didn't actually have to build a set. And they actually built the Circus Maximus on a lot in Los Angeles, one of the movie lots, to have the race scene in it. It's a wonderful scene, very historically accurate. It's a good movie, but it's also, from archaeological standpoint, a pretty accurate film. Well, the Byzantines built in Constantinople a copy of it, and they call theirs the Hippodrome. Okay, a Greek word. Circus Maximus is Latin, Hippodrome is Greek. Hippodrome, the Hippodrome, where they had the great races. The emperor would be there. He would give the signal to start the race, you know, all that sort of stuff. Okay. The third thing that Justin Hippodrome. You all right? Okay. The third thing you want to write.
Wait, what is that?
The Byzantine equivalent, the Eastern Roman equivalent of the Circus Maximus in Rome. In fact, I might as well talk about this now. We'll come back to it later on, about 3 months from now. On the turn, there's two major turns in the Hippodrome and the Circus Maximus. On the first major turn in the race course, stood at one time three huge bronze, maybe four. I'm trying to count. I think it's four. Well, maybe it's three. Anyway, several big bronze horses. Okay, when the Romans left Rome, okay, the Eastern Romans supposedly sent an expedition there to bring those bronze horses to Constantinople. And there they were installed in the Hippodrome to preside over the races, just like they had done in the city of Rome. Today, they're no longer there. They're in Venice, on the front of the cathedral in Venice, and we'll explain how they got to there when we get to that point in our study. Okay? All right? When I talk about the great bronze horses in Venice, they had been in the Hippodrome and also at the Circus Maximus in Rome. The third thing you want to write down about Justinian, of course, you already know. His greatest gift to mankind. Still in existence. Still the fundamental basis of the legal systems of umpteen countries, not us. The Code Justinian. Okay, the Code Justinian. Justinian was very aware that Rome was dead in the West. He also...
So did Justinian make Circus Maximus too and Hippodrome?
No, the Circus Maximus went back to the days of Augustus.
So it was already there, then
Yeah.
you just made the new
They made a new version in Constantinople, and then they brought the horses, supposedly, if you believe the story, they brought the horses from Rome to Constantinople. Okay. Justinian was very aware that Rome was slipping away, and before it had slipped away, he decided that he would have a new set of laws summarizing 1,000 years of legal tradition. Because remember, Roman law was based originally on the 12 tables, and then over that centuries, the Senate and the emperors issued many, many new laws. And you probably could have filled this entire wall with all the law books that the Romans would have had. And he decided that all of this needed to be combined, simplified, summarized, and give you an idea of the level of society in Constantinople when the world is falling completely apart in the West. He summons the top legal authorities at the University of Constantinople. My God, you couldn't get a first-grade education west of here. Okay? There wasn't a school anyplace by this point in this area. But in Constantinople, there was the great University of Constantinople. And he said to the law department there, he said, I need several of your top lawyers. We know who they are because at the beginning of the code it lists their names. And he said, I need you men to meet and report back to me, your emperor, on the laws of the Roman Empire. And I want you to synthesize those. I want you to summarize those. And I want you to write me books so that our legal system will be based on Roman precedents. They did. And it's called the Code Justinian or the Justinian Code. I don't care which other, you can do it either way. Code Justinian, which would be the French way of saying it, or the Justinian Code, which would be the English way of saying it. Now, sometimes you will have some college professors say to you, it's referred to as the Corpus Juris Civilis, okay, which is, of course, Latin. The reason that term is sometimes used is when you open the title page of the book, the first section is devoted to civil, not criminal law. And so the first thing you see after you flip the title page is Corpus Juris Civilis, Latin, the body of civil law. Okay? So some people use the phrase Corpus Juris Civilis for the whole thing. It's actually just the first half of the law book, but that title is sometimes interchanged. In this class, we'll always use the term Code Justinian or Justinian Code. Okay? Now, yeah.
The word juris, is that where we got our jurisdiction?
It's where we got the word jurisdiction. It's where we got the word jury. Okay? All of those come from the Latin word for law. Okay? Corpus Juris Civilis. Now, last thing. Last two things. Anybody know when the bell rings to? Let me look. This is period 4B, 1103. Okay. Last two things, and we'll call it quits. We worked hard enough for today. Thing number one. The emperor was a very powerful man. You want to write down, he is the definition of an absolute monarch. Okay? He was every bit as powerful as the emperors in Rome, quote-unquote emperors in Rome had been. However, by a quirk in Eastern Orthodox, Eastern Roman thinking, it was a dangerous job to be in. Okay? I'll explain what I mean. Mr. Brandenburg, you're convenient. You have an Eastern Roman hairdo, so come right here for a second. You're, I don't know, let's call you Aquila Sabatius Maximus. Okay, Aquila, eagle. All right, you're the Roman Emperor, Eastern Roman Emperor. Okay, and right out there, look at him. Look at that look. He's got troublemaker all over him. Your Imperial Majesty, that man is trying to cause a coup against you. Okay? And in fact, he is marching on the city of Constantinople now with a gang of his followers. Do you wish me to go out and crush him? So I go marching off, okay? And if we win, and we drag you back to Constantinople, oh God. The things we're going to do to you will make Friday the 13th movie look like a picnic. Okay? Because they were ruthless. There was no torture that was beyond the pale of the Eastern Romans. Okay? However, if I go out, and of course there'd be a crowd of, no, there'd be a crowd of thousands of people when you have one of your flunkies pick up his head with the blood running out of it, yelling, "Long live Aquila Sabatius Maximus!" Okay? Now, let's go to the opposite scenario. I go out with my army. I engage in combat with Summarus Minimus back here. Okay? And Summarus Minimus defeats me. And he marches into Constantinople. And he seizes the royal palace. And he chops you into little pieces. And he steps out on the balcony. The same crowd would go berserk saying, "Long live Summarus Minimus." Okay? Because they believe in the idea of divine providence. If it happened, it was supposed to happen. So if we crush him, then he was an evil and odious man who should be exterminated from this planet, Your Majesty. If he wins, oh, well, guess you were a bad dude. He's our new guy. God has spoken. He's the emperor. Okay? Now, as you might imagine, this makes the crapshoot a very, perhaps, intriguing possibility. Wes over here is thinking, you know, he's got to go. Well, if you know that you win, your victory will be accepted as an act of God, it might make more likely the fact that you are going to try. And when you take the fact that unfortunately the Eastern Romans used the same succession system that the Romans did, essentially none, okay? You already have an unstable system that when an emperor dies, it's unclear who's going to be the next emperor. When you have this thrown into the mix, it makes for very violent and unstable monarchy. Now, I don't want you to write a thing down, I just want you to listen. Very few emperors died of old age, surrounded by their loving family in bed. Okay? More likely, members of the family had pillows trying to smother them. These are the ends of the emperors. So just listen, and then we got one thing to write down. Don't put your notes away. Basilicus died in 477, starved in a prison. He was locked in a cell, never fed again until he just died an agonizing death by starvation. Zeno, 491, buried alive. Maurice, 602, decapitated. Phocas, 610, dismembered while alive. Okay? Herculaneus, mutilated in 641. Constantine III got off fairly lucky. He was merely poisoned. Constans II in 668 was bludgeoned to death in his bathtub. Leonidas in 705, decapitated. Tiberius III, 705, must have been a bad year, 705, decapitated. Justinian II in 711, decapitated. Philippicus in 713, blinded and left to wander the streets alone. Constantine VI, blinded. Poor Leo V, stabbed to death, but before dead, decapitated. Michael III of 867, stabbed. Constantine VII of 959, poisoned. Romanus II in 963, poisoned. Nicephorus II in 969, stabbed and decapitated. John I, 976, poisoned. I like this one. Romanus III in 1034 was poisoned, but before it did its job, they drowned him. Michael V, 1042, blinded. I like this one's an interesting. Romanus IV, 1071, poisoned, blinded, and turned out of the city. Okay? Alexis VII of 1183, strangled and then decapitated. Andronicus I in 1185, in the spirit of Halloween, was mutilated and tortured to death. And it keeps right on going. It was a very rugged political system.
I'll live blind in it.
Okay? Now, on this cheerful note, let's wrap things up. Because of the growth of Islam and the gradual weakening of the state, the Eastern Roman Empire shrinks. By the time we get to 1200, it's down to about this. By the time we get to 1300, it's down to about this. And by the time we get to the year 1453, it's the city of Constantinople and about 3 miles around it in every direction. And in 1453, a Muslim army, a Turkish Muslim army, okay, a Turkish Muslim army, a Turkish Muslim army, a Turkish Muslim army, a Turkish Muslim army besieges the city.
What kind of army was it?
A Turkish, I feel like I'm teaching freshmen. A Turkish Muslim army besieges the city. Besieged, surround, cut off from all supplies, and they start lobbing massive. And they have a new weapon, by the way, which had never been used before against the walls of Constantinople, called the cannon. Okay? And as they besiege the city and they fire artillery at the city, the walls begin to break and crumble. And a crowd of large thousands of Muslim soldiers break through the walls of Constantinople. The last emperor, Alexis Comnenus, was seen going into hand-to-hand combat and was never seen again. And after hours of the leader of the Muslim army gave them like 7 or 8 hours to do whatever they wanted in the city, so there was plundering and rape and pillage and all that sort of stuff going over. And finally, when it was all over, the new Muslim leader came to Santa Sophia, that great church that's been going around the room. They pound down the doors where there's thousands of Christians inside begging God for intercession to save them. Butcher all of them. He climbs up in his dirty boots on the altar and proclaims that this is no longer a Christian church. It is a mosque of the Islamic faith, and that the city is no longer Constantinople, it is Istanbul, and proclaims a new empire that is the one that's right here on this map. In 1648, 200 years later, the Ottoman Empire, because he was an Ottoman. Okay? And that is the end of the Roman Empire, May of 1453. Okay? Now we've done the whole history. On Monday we'll do a little bit about civilization, and then it's off to Islam. Okay? Everybody okay? Pack her up, get ready to go. Yeah.
Turkish.
You have Turkish. Sorry. When you come back, it'll be an essay. And it will be
But, you know, all those vitamins functions.
they'll probably get questions. Or I may just say, here are 4 questions. Yeah, go to it. Austin Banner. No matter where I put a test, all right, so we're going to point the emperor, okay, but our lunch. Everything makes sense today. Everybody's in good shape. Everybody's going to I know it,
Signing out.
Robert, be the eagle tonight. Civics are out. Actually, it's government.
It's not civics, it's government.
That's right, we're seniors now.
It was already signed off.
She kisses her boyfriend.
Oh crap, it was.